Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You okay?
Leo has been sacrificed, which officially marks the beginning of summer.
The way that this man embarrassed his wife so publicly, he should be ashamed and put in jail, and put this other one in jail too.
The executive at the center of a kiss cam controversy is stepping down.
Wife, he has children. These kids are going to have to watch and see this. They don't look, I would be devastated if I was his wife.
Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
The woman who shot that now infamous Coldplay kiss cam that caught two executives apparently cheating is speaking out to Inside Edition.
I could have never guessed that it would be such high-profile individuals in the video. I do feel sorry for their partners and spouses that they had to find out this way.
One stadium camera, 10 seconds of panic, and a billionaire who answered with silence. A routine kiss cam at a Coldplay concert didn't just catch an awkward embrace. It detonated a chain reaction that flipped boardrooms, rewrote resumes, and turned a very old New England surname into the most whispered word of the week. If you think the clip was the headline, you're missing the real story. The real story lives in what followed. The quiet, surgical moves that reshaped careers, reputations, and relationships without a single public statement. Tonight, we walk through the Jumbotron moment that everyone replayed, and the invisible aftermath almost no one saw coming. Because what happened after the laughter died down is where this saga becomes unforgettable, uncomfortable, and, for some, unrecoverable. It starts like every feel-good arena tradition, a band at full throttle, a sea of glow wristbands pulsing in time, and a giant screen hunting for cute couples to make the crowd cheer. The camera lands on two people who freeze. She leans, not too close, not far enough to be innocent. He looks left, then down, then tries for a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. The crowd gives the reflexive awe. The band doesn't miss a beat, but the moment is wrong. Not wrong like shy, wrong like caught. You can feel it in the way their shoulders stiffen, the way the man's hand half rises then retreats, the way the woman's mouth curves in a smile that looks like it was assembled under duress. Whoever was directing the arena feed holds the shot a fraction too long, and that extra beat becomes the fuse. The crowd laughs because that's what crowds do. The internet does something else. It goes to work. By the time people make it back to the train, the 10-second clip has been pulled, cropped, slowed down, zoomed in, and annotated with arrows and circles. Amateur sleuths want names. Body language experts materialize out of thin air. A freeze frame of the man dipping out of the frame becomes a meme on its own. The caption writes itself, either this is love or this is trouble. Then comes the deluge. The woman is identified as the head of people at a high-profile data company. The man is tagged as the CEO of the same company. Both are reportedly married, just not to each other. This is where a harmless arena ritual morphs into a public inquest. The clip is reposted with, "Wait a minute," comments. It's remixed with dramatic music, recaptioned with savage sarcasm, then stitched by creators who say, "Here's the part you missed." One account runs it at 0.25 speed to show a quick glance at the camera. Another draws a red box around the moment their hands brush. A sports-style telestrator makes an appearance to diagram the flinch. People who were at the show post shaky phone angles to prove it wasn't a deepfake. The internet doesn't just watch anymore. It conducts. 10 seconds turn into 10 million views in what feels like a single breath. Suddenly there are threads speculating whether the pair had history, whether this was a first slip or the last straw. Commenters swear they detect guilt in the man's jaw clench, denial in the woman's nervous laugh, doom in the moment they look in opposite directions. Some say it was harmless. Others call it proof. And deep in the noise, a detail emerges like a siren. The woman's husband, rum executive, old money lineage, very private, was reportedly across the world at the time, in a different time zone, conducting business while the biggest storyline of his life exploded without him. That's when the clip stops being a joke and becomes a map. Viewers start connecting pins. The stadium, the company, the titles, the spouses, the timelines. And somewhere in the rush to assign blame, the internet does what it always does. It chooses a villain, a hero, and a narrative that will get the most engagement. The villain, the pair on screen; the hero, the spouse who never asked to be in the story; the narrative, public humiliation with a billionaire twist. The template is irresistible. But as the clip keeps looping and the jokes keep getting punchier, something else is happening in rooms where jokes have no weight at all. But that wasn't the whole story. When your startup trends because of a concert clip, Saturdays stop existing. The lights in the boardroom come on early and stay on late. Lawyers sign into Zoom from vacation rentals. HR isn't just a department, it's the emergency room. The first internal email lands with a tone you can recognize without opening it, decisive, restrained, and a hair away from alarmed. There's mention of standards, leadership accountability, and taking immediate steps to preserve trust. It's impressive how much can be said without fully saying anything. Inside the company, at the center of the chaos, senior staff compile timelines. Who was where, when people found out, what the camera actually caught versus what the internet says it did. There are meetings about interim leadership because the current leader is suddenly focusing on personal matters. A follow-up message reiterates the company's commitment to policies, to transparency, to doing the right thing for employees and customers. It's corporate speak written in the key of urgency, and for once, it doesn't feel empty. There is too much heat for platitudes. Meanwhile, external communications go into contain mode, a terse statement, a promise of a review, a confirmation that certain executives are on leave. You can almost hear a communications director deciding to say less because less can't boomerang. The press pounces anyway. The phrase placed on leave is catnip. The words interim CEO trend faster than the product the company actually sells. Analysts who have never discussed this firm suddenly have thoughts on culture and governance. Competitors send quiet notes of support and public messages of nothing at all. This is the part of a scandal most viewers don't see. The meticulous accounting of every policy that might apply, every prior memo, every clause in an executive contract. Inside the org, employees slack each other with awkward emojis and jokes that have edges. Outside, users demand answers about everything from conflicts of interest to how performance reviews could ever be fair again. The company emphasizes it is taking the matter seriously. The public nods, then asks for more. And then, in a call that isn't scheduled on the official calendar, a decision is made. The CEO steps down, not today, but soon enough to count as fast. The head of people exits as well. Titles vanish from the website with quiet efficiency. Leadership pages get shorter. One executive's profile photo is replaced with a headshot of the interim leader who is suddenly tasked with making everything sound normal. Internally, the message is clear. The work matters more than the people who got famous for the wrong reason. The clip is still looping. The jokes haven't stopped. But the company has reset the chessboard and moved on to the middle game, where public sentiment is not ignored, but it is no longer allowed to drive. And while the startup fights for stability, a different storyline is gathering speed, one that isn't about software, pipelines, or seats under management. It's about lineage and quiet power, and the internet is learning an old name with new urgency. But that wasn't the whole story. There are names that read like brand logos. Then there are names that read like architecture, structures that have been around so long no one remembers when they were built, only that they loom. Cabot is one of those names if you live within a day's drive of Boston. For some, it's a chapter in a history book. For others, it's a cocktail party shorthand for inherited expectations and impeccable discretion. Andrew Cabot doesn't give speeches about legacy. He doesn't have to. His world is built on understatement. His company is a premium rum distillery with an identity that leans on craft and coastal grit. It's the kind of business that looks small until you realize how carefully it's been placed. Where others chase hype, he chases quality. Where others flood the zone with marketing, he lets scarcity do the talking. It's a playbook that only works if you can afford patience, and patience tends to be a family tradition. When the internet drags an old name into the ring with a fresh scandal, the result is cultural static. The meme economy wants loud characters and messy quotes. Old money tends to speak in ellipses, and that clash is the part of the story viewers didn't know they needed. They wanted an apology video. They got a chess player who refuses to play on camera. Suddenly, the subtext becomes the text. How does a person with that kind of background respond when the humiliation is public, the narrative is hostile, and every influencer with a ring light is pointing it at your front gate? You don't have to like old New England to understand what it values: privacy, restraint, the belief that saying less is usually the right choice and often the more devastating one. It's not a personality, it's an operating system. The internet wants brash confrontation. He offers none. The internet wants a press release that bleeds. He gives silence that freezes. For spectators who have no skin in the game, it becomes a lesson in a language they haven't heard spoken in years. That's when people start digging into the boring details that suddenly feel like plot points. Property records, advisory roles, board lists, wedding rings and old photos, captions from family holidays. The kinds of receipts that aren't sexy but are stubborn. And the more stubborn the paper gets, the more frantic the speculation becomes. Because paper doesn't go viral on its own. It needs a story to fit into. The clip gave it that. But that wasn't the whole story. A deed doesn't care about your opinion. It doesn't care how many views your video got or whether your thread hit 100,000 likes. It testifies in straight lines: names, dates, prices, signatures. When those lines point to a multi-million-dollar home co-owned by two people whose names are already trending for the worst possible reason, the effect is immediate. The internet loves gossip. It respects receipts. It recognizes the difference between rumor and record, even as it feasts on both. So the paper starts circulating: screenshots of registry entries, property valuations, headlines phrased like careful legal briefs, appears to be married, public records indicate, reportedly co-own. It's responsible hedging that signals an uncomfortable truth. This is real enough to matter, but not everything is known, which of course makes people even more certain. Ambiguity is rocket fuel for the story machine. The blanks are where the audience inserts its imagination. At the same time, professional profiles that used to be public go dark. Bios shrink to a sentence or vanish entirely. An advisory role that once looked prestigious becomes a problem, and the easiest way to solve a problem like that is to quietly remove the words that make it visible. By the time people notice, they aren't sure whether the page ever said what they thought it did. That's not deception, it's sprinting crisis management. In a reputation fire, you don't debate the placement of the furniture. You get it out. There's a human cost to all of this that the paperwork can't capture. In a house that was supposed to be a refuge, someone is sitting in a kitchen trying to decide what counts as salvageable. In the driveway, a private car idles because the family driver doesn't know whether this is still his job. On a phone, a child scrolls through classmates' DMs and discovers a screenshot of their mother on a jumbotron pinned with a cruel caption. These are the frame-by-frame losses no camera caught, the ones that keep happening long after the clip falls off the trending page. And then there's the transcontinental detail the internet loves to repeat: the report that the husband was overseas when the moment exploded. Time zones turned tragedy into theater. While the stadium roared, the day on the other side of the world was already a different color. Meetings were being taken, deals discussed, and then a phone buzzed in a pocket and a video refused to stop playing. That's when the story changes from incident to reckoning. Not because of the content of the clip, but because of where the person who mattered most was when he watched it. The gulf between those two locations becomes the dramatic space where people insert intent, motive, consequence. But that wasn't the whole story. Not all silence is equal. There's stunned silence, foolish silence, and then there's engineered silence, the kind built like a vault. When Andrew Cabot lands, the internet has already drafted a story for him. It expects denial or rage. It expects a carefully worded statement with a devastating middle paragraph. It expects a show because scandals usually feed on theater. He declines the invitation. He doesn't explain the private. He doesn't litigate the public. He doesn't enter the scrum. This refusal confuses people at first, then intimidates them. Silence removes all handles. There's nothing to pull, nowhere to grip. Commentators start assigning strategy to the quiet because giving it no meaning feels more frightening. They say he moved fast. They say he closed doors. They say he reclaimed what matters and left the rest to drift. They say a lot. Some of it is reported, a lot of it is rumor. But the narrative hardens around the same idea. This is not a man who will be performing his wounds for the crowd. Silence in this context isn't emptiness. It's action without narration. It looks like access turning off. It looks like names disappearing from lists that once conferred status. It looks like a phone number that suddenly routes to voicemail and never calls back. It looks like invitations ceasing to arrive. It looks like a life adjusting with the precision of a watchmaker instead of the violence of a hammer. The internet can't clip it because it can't see it, but people can feel it. That's why it works. In parallel, the company at the clip's epicenter continues recalibrating. The interim leader becomes the face of steady hands. Employees reorient to new reporting lines. The corporate website announces business as usual with updates that say nothing while saying everything. Investors want reassurance. Customers want distance from the drama. Rivals want to keep their smiles small enough to pass as sympathy. The cultural math becomes clear. You can't entirely escape the meme, but you can shorten its half-life by refusing to feed it. The personal adjustments are harder to diagram. Who gets the house? Who takes the SUV with the third-row seating? Who explains to extended family that the holidays will be different this year? Who revises a trust document with language no one expected to use this soon? These are not headlines. They are the slow, grinding consequences of a very fast, very public 10 seconds. The public wants closure. The private gets paperwork. At this point, the clip has transcended itself. It's no longer about what two people did or didn't do in a stadium. It's about what a third person chose not to do in public, and how that non-action redefined the stakes. It's about the reminder that in some circles, the most devastating move is withdrawal. No threats, no theatrics, just the quiet end of access. The internet calls that cold. Certain families call it finished. But that wasn't the whole story. Scandals create vacuums. Vacuums get filled, often by fakes. The other spouse in this triangle, the tech CEO's wife, is thrust into a spotlight she didn't ask for. People monitor her social accounts like they're watching a stock chart. If a name changes, it's proof of something. If a profile disappears, it's proof of something else. In the meantime, the hoax economy spins up. Bogus notes, fabricated statements, deep-faked audio that sounds real if you want it to be. The cruel part is how plausible the fakes appear. They arrive on the exact platforms where real updates would live. They're presented in the exact fonts everyone recognizes. They're shared by accounts that make a hobby of harvesting outrage and attention. In a climate where nothing is trusted and everything is suspect, people crave official words from someone attached to the wreckage. Absent that, they accept simulations. It's easier than admitting you're not entitled to answers. But beneath the noise, there is a human trying to protect her family. If she removes a last name from a bio, it's not necessarily a manifesto. It could be an act of self-defense, a firewall. If she closes a profile, it could be because she doesn't want to wake up to 1,000 strangers grating her pain. If she says nothing altogether, it might be because she understands something that many online do not. Silence is the only thing you get to keep once the frenzy starts. In the calculus of public suffering, withholding can look like wisdom, and the fake statements do more than confuse. They muddy the record for years. They make it harder for the truth to be heard later. They give detractors ammunition to insist that nothing is real when something finally is. This is the cost of viral scandal that no one budgets for. Not just reputational damage, but the permanent vandalism of the public square where facts are supposed to live. Once the hoaxers have their fun, all that remains is a mess someone else has to clean up with a toothbrush and a prayer. All of which feeds into the larger reason this story became a case study overnight. It wasn't just the power imbalance or the optics of titles that should have known better. It was the collision of modern virality with old protocols of discretion. It was a live demonstration of how fast a company can profess values and how quickly it must prove them. It was a reminder that privacy is a privilege that breaks first and loudest when trust does, and that the harm lands hardest on the people who never agreed to be in the frame. But that wasn't the whole story. Why did this blow up with such velocity? Because the roles involved cut to the heart of any corporate promise. A CEO is supposed to model the culture. A head of people is supposed to enforce it. When those two roles collide with rumors of personal entanglement, every policy document in the building starts glowing neon. Employees don't need the full story to feel betrayed. They only need to believe that the rules apply differently to the top. Once that belief takes hold, morale doesn't just dip, it sours. The fallout becomes an accelerated course in governance. Independent directors are forced to show backbone, not just signatures. Interim leadership has to radiate credibility while the paint is still drying on their title. Communications teams practice saying, "We can't share more details," in ways that don't sound like a dodge. Meanwhile, the broader industry updates its mental checklist: how to handle executive relationships, how to audit conflicts, how to communicate compassion without ceding accountability. The speed of the clip forced a speed of response many companies never actually rehearse. Now they will. There's also the uncomfortable conversation about power dynamics. Even if two executives insist a relationship was private and consensual, the chart on the wall says otherwise. Influence isn't just a line of boxes, it's gravity. Employees read the situation through the lens of their own vulnerability. If the people who write the rules can bend them to suit personal lives, then the rules are performance art. In that environment, performance reviews, promotions, and raises begin to look suspect no matter how fair they actually were. Trust doesn't erode in sentences, it erodes in glances. PR experts will tell you that the right statement can soften a blow. They'll also tell you that sometimes there is no right statement, only right actions. Here, the right actions were brutal in their simplicity: accept resignations, seat an interim, recommit to standards, and keep shipping product. Not because people aren't in pain, but because the organization has to demonstrate continuity. That seems cold until you remember that a company is not a person. It doesn't heal, it stabilizes. The last lesson is the one viewers felt but didn't have words for. Silence, real silence, Practiced silence became the most potent message of all. It didn't ask for sympathy, it didn't argue facts, it didn't draft an essay about heartbreak. It created a vacuum around what used to be shared and watched the vacuum do its work. That sounds cruel until you tally the alternatives, each one a different flavor of spectacle. In an age obsessed with explaining, the choice not to perform became the single most effective performance. But that wasn't the whole story. The internet's timeline is frantic. Real life's timeline is patient. After the trending pages move on, the aftershocks begin. Lawyers write paragraphs that will outlive news cycles. Accountants categorize assets and phrases smoother than grief. HR teams finalize offboarding paperwork that used to require a smile and now just needs a courier. The work is dull and necessary. It's where closure hides. What comes next for each player feels predictable and yet won't be. The data company will institutionalize what it learned. It will codify its policies, onboard with a speech that mentions integrity 3 times, and insist that every manager knows what the boundaries look like. In a year, the scandal will be a paragraph in a training deck, then a bullet point, then a whispered "remember when" for newer teams who cannot believe they missed the week. The whole building felt like it was vibrating. For the executives who exited, there will be a period of disappearance followed by a re-emergence calibrated with the care of a satellite re-entry, a new title at a smaller firm, an advisory role that doesn't require a bio, a quiet consulting practice. Friends who remained will speak about growth and complexity, and detractors will roll their eyes. In the long run, if there was talent, it will find a way to be useful again because markets are far more forgiving than comment sections. That's the part no one likes to admit. For the spouses, the arc is more personal and more permanent. The rum executive's refusal to narrate his life for the crowd will continue to confound some and inspire others. It will also protect him. People can only weaponize what they can see. His silence is not a stunt, it's his strategy. It will spare him from some pain and sentence him to other kinds. Privacy is a fortress with drafty rooms. As for the woman at the center of the clip, the internet will pretend to be her biographer and fail as usual. It will write motivations for her and cast her as a symbol of everything from corporate hypocrisy to modern longing. The truth is less cinematic. She will rebuild in the fragments where cameras never go. In a new routine, in cheaper routines, in the strange normalcy of a life that used to be louder. She will think about the night at the stadium less often than the audience assumes, and then, years later, more often than she expects. Culturally, the story will calcify into shorthand. People will reference it with the Coldplay cam, and everyone will nod, the way we nod when someone mentions the elevator speech or the glass ceiling. It will become a quick way to say a long lesson. Optics are policy, conduct is culture, silence is sometimes a verdict. In dinner conversations, it will be retold as a warning. If you occupy the roles that define the rules, your private life is no longer entirely private. That's harsh. It's also true. And yet, there's a gentler reading available if you're willing to look for it, one that recognizes that human beings are messy long before they are leaders, spouses, symbols, or sinners. One that understands a clip this short cannot possibly hold the full weight of a marriage or a career. One that acknowledges that the most sophisticated scandals don't end with a particularly juicy reveal. They end with a series of small, quiet adjustments that add up to a life you didn't plan for but now must live. The last unanswered question will hang in the air for years. Did the silence fix anything? It fixed the narrative, in the sense that it hardened it. It fixed the company, in the sense that it moved forward. It fixed the household, in the sense that it drew clean lines. Whether it fixed the people is a mystery that belongs to them, not to us. The camera gave us 10 seconds. Everything else belongs behind doors we don't get to open. A stadium camera lit the fuse, but silence carried the blast. 10 seconds on a jumbotron spiraled into a seminar on leadership, optics, and the modern cost of getting caught. A data company scrambled, an HR playbook got rewritten, and an old New England surname reminded everyone that in certain rooms the most devastating sentence contains no words at all. You watched the clip. Now you know why the aftershocks felt heavier than the moment itself, and why the quiet moves will be remembered long after the memes expire. If you're waiting for a final statement to make this feel complete, don't. The camera only showed one angle. The rest is being resolved off-screen, with signatures, silences, and a kind of discipline the internet can't monetize. In the end, the Jumbotron moment won the week. The way they handled the silence will decide who wins the years that follow, and that, more than the kiss, more than the memes, more than the outrage, is the part of the story that will outlast us all.